On May 26, 2026, two things were happening simultaneously. In Doha, Iranian diplomats were sitting across from Qatari mediators in air-conditioned rooms, discussing ceasefire terms and nuclear negotiation timelines. In New Delhi, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was standing in front of cameras telling reporters that a nuclear agreement with Iran could be finalized in his words, a couple of days. Markets responded. Brent crude dipped. Headlines across every major outlet carried a note of cautious optimism that hadn't been present in weeks. And at the same moment, under cover of darkness in the Strait of Hormuz, IRGC Navy fast attack boats and hovercraft were laying live contact sea mines in the world's most critical oil shipping corridor. Not theoretical mines. Not a planning exercise. Physical contact detonation sea mines placed into the water while ceasefire negotiations were actively ongoing. CENTCOM caught them in the act. And CENTCOM did what CENTCOM does. U.S. forces launched immediate self-defense strikes against missile launch sites and the mine-laying watercraft near Bandar Abbas, Iran's primary naval stronghold position directly at the narrowest point of the Strait of Hormuz. Explosions were reported at Bandar Abbas, Surik, and Yask simultaneously along the Iranian coastline. This was not a single retaliatory strike against one target. It was a coordinated multi-axis strike package executed with speed and precision across multiple locations at once. CENTCOM spokesperson Tim Hawkins confirmed the operation in a public statement. U.S. forces conducted self-defense strikes in southern Iran to protect American troops from threats posed by Iranian forces. Targets included missile launch sites and Iranian watercraft in the process of emplacing mines. CENTCOM stated it was defending its forces while using restraint during the ongoing ceasefire. Iran's official response called the American strikes a ceasefire violation. Take a moment with that. The regime that was physically placing mines in an international waterway during active peace negotiations called the military response to that operation a ceasefire violation. This is the story that tells you everything you need to know about the Iranian regime's negotiating posture, its internal coherence, and the gap between what its diplomats say in Doha and what its military does in the Strait of Hormuz at midnight. And to understand why this moment matters beyond the immediate headline, you need to understand three things: what Bandar Abbas actually is, who the IRGC Navy actually is, and how the U.S. military almost certainly executed these strikes based on the target geometry and available platforms. Bandar Abbas is the capital of Hormuzgan province, sitting on the northern shore of the Strait of Hormuz at its narrowest point, where the waterway compresses to roughly 21 nautical miles wide, with internationally recognized shipping lanes running through corridors that Iran has spent decades attempting to treat as its sovereign territory. Iran's legally recognized territorial water boundary extends 13.8 nautical miles from its coastline. The IRGC has never operated as though that boundary means anything. To the Revolutionary Guard, the entire strait is Iranian. Every tanker that transits is passing through their checkpoint. Bandar Abbas is the office that runs the checkpoint. The facility is not a single base. It is a layered, interlocking military and naval logistics complex built up over decades specifically to dominate this choke point. The Shahid Bahadur Naval Base serves as headquarters for the Iranian Navy's Southern Fleet. Operating alongside it, with an entirely separate command structure, is the IRGC Navy's primary fast attack boat hub. Two separate forces sharing geography but answering to completely different chains of command. The conventional Iranian Navy answers, at least nominally, to the government and defense ministry. The IRGC Navy answers directly to the supreme leader, bypassing the Iranian government entirely. That distinction becomes critical when you're trying to understand how a mine-laying operation unfolds during active ceasefire negotiations without the Iranian Foreign Ministry apparently having any awareness of it, or at least, that is the position Tehran would prefer the world to accept. The IRGC has staged ceremonies at Bandar Abbas with over 110 fast attack craft lined up on a single pier simultaneously. That is not a coast guard. That is not a defensive posture. That is a sea denial force built specifically for swarm warfare in the kind of confined, shallow water environment that the Strait of Hormuz represents. Beyond the fast attack fleet, Bandar Abbas functions as the logistics hub for Iran's broader naval resupply network. the transit point for weapons shipments that have historically moved toward Yemen, toward Hezbollah logistics chains, toward proxy networks across the region. The port also processes a significant portion of Iran's legitimate commercial imports, meaning it sits at the intersection of military power and economic lifeline simultaneously. The offshore island network connected to Bandar Abbas extends the strategic picture further. Larak Island, Abu Musa, and the Tunb Islands form an arc of IRGC outposts extending Iran's operational reach across the southern half of the strait. Iran has used these islands as forward operating positions to monitor, harass, and threaten commercial and military traffic for more than 50 years. Since its seizure of Abu Musa and the Tunbs in 1971, Larak Island specifically has been confirmed as a fast attack boat staging site, with underground storage facilities for speedboats reportedly built into the coastline to provide survivability against exactly the kind of strikes CENTCOM just executed. And here is the detail that most coverage has missed entirely. Satellite imagery reviewed by open-source intelligence analysts in late April and early May 2026 showed active construction and repair work at Bandar Abbas naval facilities. Iran was not sitting idle during the ceasefire window. It was using the pause to rebuild, reload, and reposition assets that had been damaged in earlier rounds of military action. The mine-laying operation on the night of May 25 was not an impulse decision. Handling, preparing, and deploying contact sea mines from fast attack boats and hovercraft requires days of coordination and preparation at minimum. All of it conducted while Iranian diplomats were in Doha expressing commitment to a negotiated resolution. The IRGC Navy is not a conventional naval force. It does not pretend to be. It is a purpose-built sea denial and guerrilla maritime warfare organization optimized for one primary mission: controlling who can and cannot use the Strait of Hormuz. The Peacock class fast attack craft are the most likely platform running the mine-laying operation. Monday night represents the core of this capability. These vessels top out at approximately 50 knots, carry to Nasser Qusr anti-ship missiles with active terminal guidance and a 20 nautical mile range, and are equipped with torpedo tubes. 3-man crew. A radar cross-section roughly equivalent to a large jet ski dot in a swarm of 30. That is a genuine tactical problem even for an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer running an Aegis combat system. The vessels are fast enough to close on a commercial tanker before a larger warship can always establish a complete firing solution. They are shallow drafted enough with a hull depth of under 1 meter to operate in water where frigates cannot follow. And at low speed in darkness, they are quiet enough to approach sensor coverage boundaries before accelerating into an attack run. That was the design philosophy. Speed, shallowness, and swarm volume to overwhelm defensive systems through simultaneous multi-vector threats. The hovercraft variant adds another dimension, capable of transitioning between water and shoreline, operating in the extremely shallow coastal environments that define much of the strait's northern edge, and difficult to track on conventional surface radar because of their low profile and high speed across surface inconsistencies. The IRGC Navy does not freelance. It answers directly to the supreme leader, bypassing the Iranian government and defense ministry entirely. When IRGC boats are conducting mine-laying operations in the Strait of Hormuz during active ceasefire negotiations, that is not a rogue unit going off script. That is a policy decision. That is a strategic signal, delivered in the dark, through the water, while diplomats smile in Doha. CENTCOM sent back a strategic signal of its own. CENTCOM did not specify which platforms or munitions were used in the Monday night strike package. That deliberate operational security is standard practice. But the target geometry, the platforms known to be operating in the theater, and prior CENTCOM strike footage provide enough information to construct the most likely execution sequence against the mine-laying watercraft. The primary candidates are MQ-9 Reaper drones and FA-180F Super Hornets operating off a carrier in the Gulf of Oman. The Super Hornet configuration most consistent with this target set would involve AGM-154, joint standoff weapons, GPS and inertial navigation guided glide munitions with a standoff range of approximately 70 nautical miles. That range keeps the launch aircraft entirely outside the effective engagement envelope of any man-portable air defense systems the fast attack boats were likely carrying. The weapon falls nearly vertically onto a stationary or slow-moving small target, consistent with strike footage. CENTCOM has previously released showing munitions impacting Iranian fast attack craft on or near their moorings. The MQ-9 Reaper carrying AGM-114 Hellfire missiles represents an equally viable option for this target set. A Hellfire from a Reaper at medium altitude provides precision strike capability against moving surface targets in low-light conditions. Exactly the operational profile of IRGC fast attack boats. Conducting a nighttime mine-laying run, the Reaper can track and engage a moving small craft with a level of precision that a manned aircraft delivering larger munitions cannot always match against a target that size. CENTCOM has previously released footage consistent with both profiles of munitions impacting small watercraft from altitude, vertically, with minimal collateral effect on surrounding infrastructure. Against the missile launch sites and air defense systems, Iran has been deploying the Bavar 373 surface-to-air missile system along the Bandar Abbas coastal belt, its indigenous long-range air defense platform claiming engagement ranges of 100 to 150 nautical miles and, according to Iranian state claims, the ability to track low observable aircraft, suppressing that system before or simultaneously with strikes against the watercraft, would be a standard suppression of enemy air defenses sequence. The most likely execution, A-18G, Growler electronic warfare aircraft jamming the Bavar 373's radar frequencies, combined with F-35C stealth fighters using their sensor systems to flood the Iranian radar's frequency bands, forcing it into a choice between staying silent and staying blind, or illuminating and broadcasting its precise location to every AGM-88 harm anti-radiation missile in the package. The AGM-88HRM locks onto active radar emissions and flies directly through the transmission beam at approximately Mach 2. Any Iranian radar operator who turned their system on in that environment was providing CENTCOM with a precise targeting solution. The F-35C's role in leading the strike package, using its low observable profile to penetrate the defensive bubble and designate targets while electronic warfare assets suppressed radar coverage, is consistent with how the U.S. military has executed similar integrated strike packages throughout this conflict. HIMARS, rocket systems positioned on Allied territory in the region, represent an additional option for the land-based targets. No aircraft, no sonic boom warning, no visible launch signature from the target's perspective. Just a precision munition arriving at Mach 3 from a direction, and at a time the target's defenders cannot predict. Iran spent years building what it described as an anti-access bubble over the Strait of Hormuz approach. On Monday night, CENTCOM systematically disassembled it. The mine-laying operation is militarily significant, but it is strategically revealing in a way that matters more than the tactical exchange. Consider the organizational reality of what happened. Iranian diplomats were in Doha conducting active negotiations. The Iranian Foreign Ministry's public posture was engagement and progress toward a ceasefire agreement. Secretary Rubio was publicly expressing optimism about a deal timeline measured in days. Simultaneously, the IRGC Navy, which answers not to the Iranian government or foreign ministry but directly to the supreme leader, was conducting a coordinated mine-laying operation that required days of preparation, multiple vessels, mine-handling equipment, and nighttime operational coordination. In one of the world's most heavily monitored waterways, one of two things is true. Either the Iranian government's diplomatic team had no knowledge of the operation, meaning the regime's right hand and left hand are operating in completely different strategic realities, with the IRGC executing policy that actively sabotages the diplomatic track without coordination or communication. Or the Iranian government's diplomatic team did no, meaning the entire Doha engagement was a deliberate cover operation designed to create the impression of good faith negotiation while the military track pursued a completely different objective. Neither of those possibilities describes a negotiating partner operating in good faith. Neither describes a regime with the organizational coherence to implement any agreement it signs. And neither describes a situation where diplomatic optimism about a deal in a couple of days was grounded in an accurate assessment of what was actually happening. inside the Iranian decision-making structure. The IRGC does not freelance. This was a policy decision made somewhere in the Iranian command structure. The question of who made it, and whether anyone in the diplomatic track knew, is the question that reveals exactly how fractured the Iranian leadership has become. A supreme leader who cannot appear in public. A foreign ministry conducting negotiations it may not control. An IRGC Navy executing operations that actively undermine those negotiations. A parliament where factions are reportedly exchanging physical threats over whether to pursue a ceasefire. This is not a government. This is competing power centers operating without coordination, each pursuing institutional survival strategies that are actively incompatible with each other. While the Strait of Hormuz dominated regional attention, something happened on May 19 that received a fraction of the coverage it warranted. Russia conducted its largest nuclear force exercise in years, without prior public announcement and without the international notification that such exercises are conventionally expected to include. The exercise ran through May 21 and involved 65,000 personnel, 200 missile launchers, 140 aircraft, and 8 strategic nuclear submarines. During the exercise, Russia fired a live RS-24 intercontinental ballistic missile, launched Kh-55 cruise missiles from a surface vessel, and conducted a submarine-launched ballistic missile test from under the Barents Sea. Belarus participated as a full partner for the first time, with Belarusian forces practicing the receipt and operational procedures for nuclear weapons delivery systems. Moscow characterized the exercise as a signal to NATO that framing is consistent with Russian communication strategy. Every military demonstration is presented as a defensive response to Western provocation. The actual significance of the exercise is the decision to conduct it without the standard international notification. At a moment of elevated global military tension, with live warhead-capable systems across multiple delivery platforms simultaneously. An unannounced live ICBM launched during a period when American military forces are actively engaged in combat operations in the Middle East and NATO's eastern flank is under sustained Russian pressure is not a routine training event. It is a signal delivered deliberately to an audience that knows exactly how to read it. The strategic picture on May 26, 2026, viewed honestly, leads to a specific conclusion: the 60-day negotiation window, established by the Memorandum of Understanding, is running against an Iranian regime that is simultaneously conducting military operations designed to undermine the ceasefire conditions those negotiations required. The IRGC is not negotiating. It is using the negotiation window as operational cover. CENTCOM is responding to that reality with immediate, targeted self-defense strikes that degrade specific capabilities without escalating beyond the immediate provocation. The operational message is consistent. The United States will enforce the conditions of the ceasefire through kinetic action regardless of what Iranian diplomats say in Doha. Iran's declining launch rates, fewer missile launches and fewer drone launches every day, a trend CENTCOM has publicly documented, reflect a degraded inventory that the blockade and ongoing strikes are consuming faster than Iran can replace. The mine-laying operation suggests the IRGC is shifting toward asymmetric sea denial tactics precisely because its conventional strike capacity is being exhausted. Mines are cheap. They require no sophisticated manufacturing base. They can be deployed by small, fast watercraft with minimal crew, and they threaten the commercial shipping traffic whose disruption is the IRGC's primary remaining leverage over global energy markets. CENTCOM's response to catching the mine-laying operation in real time and striking the watercraft before the mines could be fully in place and demonstrates a surveillance and response capacity that the IRGC had apparently not fully accounted for in its operational planning. The 60-day clock is running. The uranium is still in Iran. The IRGC is still operating. The diplomats are still in Doha. And somewhere in the Iranian command structure, a decision is being made right now about whether the next move is another mine-laying operation, a direct escalation, or the first genuine signal that the regime is willing to accept the terms that would end this. Every previous signal has pointed in one direction. Iran built what it called an anti-access bubble over the Strait of Hormuz. Fast attack swarms coastal missile batteries, mine-laying capability, island outposts, underground boat storage. Monday night, CENTCOM took a pin to it. The regime that was negotiating peace in Doha was simultaneously laying mines in the dark. The regime that called the American response a ceasefire violation had just violated the ceasefire. The regime whose IRGC answers to a supreme leader who cannot appear in public is making military decisions that its own diplomats cannot explain or apparently anticipate. This is what a fractured command structure looks like under maximum external pressure. The question is not whether the regime can negotiate in good faith. Monday night answered that question. The question now is what CENTCOM does when the next set of boats leaves the pier. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next move is already being planned in a room somewhere between Doha and Bandar Abbas, and when it happens, the response will be faster than the headline.